think about the world we're living in right now. Everything's temperature controlled. Food's right there. We have this level of safety.
Hmm.
It's something our ancestors, well, they couldn't even have imagined it.
Right.
But then contrast that with like the sheer brutality of the past. Just surviving another day was a huge deal.
Yeah.
It's kind of a weird paradox, isn't it?
It really is.
Could all this comfort actually be, I don't know, weakening something in us, making us less ready for actual hardship?
That's a really interesting question. It makes you wonder if, while these modern comforts are great for our quality of life, maybe they're also kind of shielding us from the challenges that, historically speaking, really forged mental toughness,
Yeah.
a kind of deep fearlessness.
Exactly. And that's precisely what we're going to dig into today. Forget this idea that fearlessness means you just don't feel fear.
That's
Not it.
No, not at all.
We're looking at more like a skill you learn, a mindset you build,
Yeah.
basically by facing down real adversity and, getting through it.
Yeah.
So what we're drawing on today, it comes from writings that really analyze, like power dynamics, what makes individuals succeed, looking at historical figures, but also people today. And there's this theme that keeps popping up.
Which is?
That this core of fearlessness often seems to be right there underneath great achievements.
Yeah, and if you look at it broadly, it suggests it's not some, magic trait only a few people are born with. The patterns and the sources, they really point to it being something that's developed, sharpened, you could say, by certain experiences, and importantly, how we react to those experiences.
So the mission for you listening is to really get how this fearlessness actually grows, how it shows up in different situations, and crucially, how you can take these ideas and use them in your own life. Gain a bit more agency, stop letting fear call the shots.
Makes sense.
Okay, so let's unpack this first bit. The nature of fear itself. And this quality of fearlessness. The sources seem pretty clear. Feeling fear is totally natural. It's human. Almost like a basic survival thing, right?
Absolutely. It's wired into us. But the key distinction, I think, is between just overcoming specific fears, which can be a bit defensive, reacting to something, and actually developing a fearless attitude.
Okay, what's the difference there?
Well, the attitude is more proactive. It's marked by this sort of fundamental boldness, a willingness to go beyond the usual safe path. It's not just about not being scared. It's about actively, maybe even strategically, approaching things that could be scary.
Right, so it's not just being brave when something bad happens. It's more about attacking life, almost.
Yeah.
With this sense of urgency, this confidence that you can handle stuff.
Exactly. And the sources really highlight the role of, sheer will, sometimes even a hunger for influence or power, pushing people beyond just managing fear to actively seeking out big challenges.
Okay, so if fearlessness is cultivated,
Yeah.
what kind of situations actually do the cultivating? What are the tighter circumstances that forge this?
Well, the material gives some pretty stark examples. We're talking about things like extreme poverty, the constant threat of war, living through, revolutionary times, leading during a massive crisis, or even really personal stuff like deep loss or maybe a near-death experience. Situations where fear is just always there.
And you see this split, don't you? Some people are just crushed by that kind of adversity. Understandably.
Completely. But then there's this other group, maybe smaller, who don't just survive it, they seem to come out stronger, tempered by it almost.
It kind of reminds me of that whole pioneer spirit idea from 19th century America. The environment was so hostile, it forced a certain kind of self-reliance, a readiness for the unknown.
Precisely. The environment itself acted like a tough teacher, demanding resilience, adaptability, things maybe you don't need quite so acutely when life is more predictable, more sheltered.
Okay, so that sets the stage. Let's get into some real examples now, some case studies that make this feel a bit more concrete. First one, Curtis Jackson. 50 Cent.
Yeah, his story is fascinating. What's really telling about his early life, growing up where he did, is how it just fundamentally changed his relationship with fear. Well, in that environment, showing fear, any vulnerability, could get you exploited fast. So he learned incredibly quickly just to hide it.
But it wasn't just hiding it, was it? The sources say he actually, deliberately put himself in situations that caused it anxiety.
He did. It was almost like exposure therapy, Facing down armed people repeatedly, each time, the fear maybe lost a bit of its power.
And this wasn't just about physical danger either, right? There's this idea of the daunting obstacle for hustlers.
Yeah, the fear of leaving the street life. It's familiar, even though it's dangerous and ultimately limiting. It's its own kind of trap, a risky comfort zone.
But he broke out of that. And that same fearless approach, he took it into business, didn't he? like in the music industry, trying new things when everyone else was sticking to the old ways.
Absolutely. What's really striking is how he seemed to overcome that really deep fear of just being different, of not fitting in. He made his own path, even when it went against the grain.
And then there's the shooting, that near-death experience.
Yeah.
Somehow, it didn't break him. It became like fuel.
Yeah, it almost solidified his resolve, his public image. It's a really powerful example of turning extreme adversity into, well, incredible strength.
Okay, let's shift gears. Frederick Douglass. A completely different context, but just as powerful. His story really shows how fear can be used as a tool of oppression, doesn't it? Slavery, I mean.
Absolutely. The entire system of slavery relied on creating and maintaining deep, profound fear. But Douglass, he actively fought against that.
Like learning to read and write in secret.
Yeah.
Knowing the punishment if you got caught. It takes incredible guts.
Phenomenal courage. And then the source mentions him physically fighting back against a whipping. That act of defiance, even against overwhelming power, it apparently changed how he was treated. It was him directly challenging that fear mechanism.
And of course, escaping slavery itself, an immense act of bravery, and then becoming such a powerful voice against it.
Right. And even within the abolitionist movement, he showed that independence. He didn't just toe the line. He started his own newspaper, challenged some of his allies even. He wasn't afraid to follow his own convictions.
Okay, now Abraham Lincoln. His background, also tough. That frontier upbringing, it must have given him a very practical, grounded outlook.
It seems like it. And that pragmatism really showed during the Civil War. His decision-making often looked slow, deliberate. Sometimes it went totally against what his advisors were telling him. He wasn't easily swayed by panic or convention.
Yeah, and think about who he trusted, like Ulysses S. Grant, definitely unconventional, and his willingness to work with political enemies for the bigger goal, preserving the Union.
That ability to see the reality of the war clearly, amidst all the emotion and chaos, that takes a deep kind of fearlessness. He wasn't afraid to look the brutal truth right in the eye, unlike that tendency towards escapism we talked about earlier.
Yeah, which brings us to this quote from James Baldwin. People who cannot suffer can never grow up, can never discover who they are. It just nails that connection, doesn't it? Facing hard stuff is how you find out who you really are. Makes you think, right? Have you ever had a moment like that where getting through something tough really changed how you saw yourself?
It really emphasizes that maybe, just maybe, shielding ourselves from all discomfort, all fear, might actually hold back our growth, stop us from discovering our own strength.
Which kind of leads into this next point, the potential decline of realism in societies that get too comfortable. The sources suggest that when things get easier, safer, maybe we start losing touch with the harder truths.
There's that parallel drawn with ancient Rome, starting out pragmatic, stoic. Then as the empire and wealth grew, so did this hunger for entertainment, distraction, and eventually they lost perspective. Small problems seemed huge, big threats got ignored.
And the argument is maybe something similar happens today. We're surrounded by distractions, entertainment. It makes it pretty easy to just avoid the unpleasant stuff.
And that avoidance, that leaning towards fantasy, it can make people easier to mislead, maybe? Because they haven't practiced telling the difference between what's real and what's, just noise.
So fearlessness becomes almost essential for just seeing things clearly.
Right.
Realism. You have to be okay with looking at the tough parts of life without, flinching.
Exactly. It means sharpening your eye, paying attention to the details, the hidden motives, the actual dynamics playing out. It's a kind of street smarts almost, not just book smarts.
Okay, so we get that fearlessness is important for dealing with reality, but how do we actually build it? The sources give some practical ideas here. First up, self-reliance.
Yeah, like we saw with 50 Cent, forced into it early on. But also, look at Reuben Hurricane Carter in prison. He made a conscious choice to stay independent in his mind, even when the system was trying to break him.
Carter's story is amazing there, refusing to conform, even if it meant solitary, because giving in, becoming totally dependent, would crush his spirit. He chose dignity over comfort. It really hits home that idea of overcoming childish dependence, as the sources call it.
And building on that, there's this idea of reclaiming dead time.
Right, the Cornelius Vanderbilt example. Taking a boring job, like working on his dad's ferry.
And turning it into an urgent apprenticeship. He wasn't just clocking in and out. He was watching, learning, figuring out how to make it better, how to eventually do his own thing. It's about shifting your mindset from just enduring stuff to actively learning from it.
Then there's strategic aggression. Knowing when to be bad.
Which sounds intense, but it's really about healthy assertiveness, right?
Yeah.
Being able to state your needs, set boundaries firmly but respectfully, not being paralyzed by the fear of what others might think.
Yeah, learning to displease people sometimes, as the source puts it. Making a choice not to be held back by fear of upsetting someone.
Mm.
And it's different from being passive-aggressive, which often comes from not being able to be direct.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Then there's mastery through process. This is about developing patience, basically. Tolerating the boring, repetitive stuff that's often needed to get really good at anything.
Like Isaac Newton during the plague.
Precisely. Everyone else is panicking or bored stiff in isolation, and he uses that time for deep, focused, probably tedious study, and boom, major breakthroughs. It's about distrusting the quick fix, valuing the hard yards.
And alongside that, building real self-belief. Defining yourself from the inside out, not based on what everyone else thinks.
Yeah, having that strong inner core, nurturing a sense of purpose, maybe even thinking you're meant for something significant, and seeing failures not as proof you're worthless, but just as, data points, learning opportunities.
Which connects to embracing free will, doesn't it? Having the guts to leave situations that are comfortable, but deadening.
Right.
Trusting yourself to handle the uncertainty. Amelia Earhart comes to mind here, always pushing boundaries, taking risks.
Definitely. And related to that is constant reinvention, not getting stuck, always adapting, challenging your own views, seeking new angles, like JFK constantly adjusting his image for the political climate, or Frank Lloyd Wright refusing to just stick to one architectural style.
Right, Wright kept pushing, breaking molds his whole career.
And finally, creating the sense of destiny. Projecting that absolute conviction in your path, it can be incredibly magnetic. Think Joan of Arc. That unwavering belief, it almost makes things happen, inspires others.
It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy, that level of conviction.
Yeah.
Now, the sources also mention a strong ego. We need to be careful here, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's not about being arrogant or narcissistic. In this context, a strong ego means healthy self-respect, knowing your boundaries, having confidence in your abilities and your worth. It's that inner resilience that doesn't need constant pats on the back.
Okay, got it. And the last point, confronting mortality. Seems heavy, but the idea is interesting.
It is. The sources suggest that actually accepting that life is finite instead of pushing that thought away, it can be a powerful motivator.
How so?
Well, instead of being this thing you're scared of and try to ignore, the awareness of death can bring a sense of urgency, of meaning to your life now. It can make you appreciate the present more, push you to do things that really matter. There's this idea of finding the sublime, that mix of awe and maybe even terror in thinking about it, which sharpens your appreciation for being alive.
So, bringing this all home, fearlessness isn't about not feeling fear. It's about building a mindset, a resilience that lets you face fear, learn from it, and act anyway.
Exactly. It's built through things like self-reliance, using your time well, being assertive when needed, sticking with the process of mastery, and having that strong inner belief.
And it's crucial for everyone listening to remember these ideas aren't just for, historical giants or people in extreme situations. Think about your own life. Where is fear maybe holding you back? Where are you choosing comfort over something that feels more authentic?
Yeah, how could some of these principles maybe help you shift your perspective, change your actions? Have you ever noticed, for instance, how doing something scary repeatedly can make it less scary over time?
Think about those high-pressure moments you've been through, big or small. How did you react? What did you discover about your own resilience then?
And maybe a final thought to chew on. In this world we've made that's so comfortable, so safe in many ways, could that ease actually be kind of inadvertently making it harder for us to develop that deep resilience, that boldness we see in these figures?
Yeah. What unconventional path might you be avoiding right now, maybe without even realizing it, just because you're afraid of standing out or rocking the boat? Something to think about.